Hello, everyone, and welcome to Divide and Conquer. We're named as such because of our intent. What is our intent? Well, we are a group of sport and performance psychology consultants and contractors here at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and we are also a part of the Army Resilience Directorate. You can find them on Facebook and Twitter at Army Resilience. So each episode we pose a question or issue related to resilience and or performance enhancement that we as a group will conquer through our individual answers. And you'll find out pretty quickly that we don't always agree, and our stances can sometimes and very often so are divided. So we hope you enjoy our take on today's question, which is, so amidst COVID-19 and social distancing, do you believe performance will change for athletes who are used to playing with fans in the stands? That rhymed. If so, how? If not, why not? So here with me, I have Morgan and Jess, and my name is Diego. So I'm going to pass it off to whoever wants to answer first.
Well, we have at least now one example of sports playing without fans, and that would be the NWSL, so the National Women's Soccer League. And they have done a month-long tournament whereby they play games every few days, and it's clear that there are no fans in the stands. There are some support staff and some family members, but in essence, there are no fans. And it's interesting because they pump in fan sounds, but it is only for the viewership. So if you turn on CBS All Access, you can hear the fans cheering.
Not a sponsor.
That is not a sponsor. Just letting you know where you can watch. And you can hear fans as if they're in fact in the stands, but they are not. And then Kelly O'Hara, which is a player on one of the teams, was interviewed about it, and she said it's very different because they don't hear anything. They don't hear the actual sounds coming into what we're hearing on the TV. And she said it's interesting because we can hear the actual calls that we're making to one another. Like, we can hear one another. We can talk much more fluently. And so that's helpful for them. And I think in this stage of just getting back and the preseason shortened, that you may need that extra, we are allowed to talk to one another. We can hear each other, and that might help facilitate better play at this stage. But you have to think about the energy that you feel when a crowd is present, when people are actually watching you, and the very people that give you a job more or less are missing. I think that there's something to say for not having those people present, and that impacting how you even perceive the level of competition and the importance of the game.
Golf is another sport that has come back without fans, and I honestly think that no fans in golf is helpful because it's such an internal war that not having the distractions of people, or like 1,000 people crowding around you while you try to hit something out of a bunker. Is that the right word?
Can be a bunker.
Or the rough, or whatever, wherever they are. Aha, learning. Yay.
Golf words.
Golf words. Okay. Anyways, in my mind, probably helpful not to have fans in that particular sport watching you, surrounding you. Other than the energy, what do you think fans actually do for an athlete? Psychologically, I should say.
To me, it seems like a chicken or the egg question. So it's like, besides, what'd you say again? Besides what?
Besides, like, energy, because Jess talked about the energy that you can draw on from fans if they're in the stands. So we know that fans give energy to people who are playing. What else does a fan base do for an athlete psychologically?
Yeah, so I think I'm still going to go with what I originally said. So it's like, if let's say you play for a team that has a pretty strong, like, fan system or whatever, and, you don't necessarily have to hear them or see them to understand how strong and how much depth there is to that fan base. And I think just being aware of that probably plays into the energy thing for sure, but I think also instills to some extent confidence within the team or athlete, whoever it may be. But at the same time, it's like, is it due to the increase in energy if the fans are present, and if they're not present, I think it's like I've seen interviews, post game interviews for soccer players saying like, this is for the fans. Like, they'll score and they'll celebrate in front of the section of the stadium where the home fans typically watch the game. Even that might be enough to inspire some type of, I think it would be confidence more than anything else.
I hear motivation.
That too.
So, intrinsic motivation, we inherently enjoy a task because it fulfills basic needs for us. So, autonomy, a sense of control, relatedness, a sense of connection with people, and competency, a sense of like you're good at something or you're good at what you're doing. And to me, I don't know if I necessarily can see that fans give a team confidence, but from what you're talking about, it sounds more like motivation, that it's targeting that relatedness piece. So because I'm playing for these people, it's an identity, so it's more internal motivation, but then I'm connected, so it's intrinsic motivation. So without fans, or even if fans aren't in the area and just knowing them, that's pushing. Like, a fan base in general just drives more motivation for people to push through.
You're wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You're wrong-ish.
No, I think we're getting at the same thing here.
Just calling it different things.
I think I just needed your piece to explain how the confidence gets there.
Word, I'm listening.
I mean, like, motivation. So if someone is able to draw and use the fans as a source of some type of internal motivation, I think naturally that will inspire some type of confidence. And all that is tied to the fan base. Whether or not they're present, probably to a certain extent plays into the motivation aspect as well. But there's still going to be some type of motivational aspect that's tied back to the fans. And that, I think, will also inspire confidence to increase to a certain extent. What's wrong with me? Extent. Certain extent. Does that make any sense?
So one of the sources of confidence that we can leverage, or I guess pull upon, would be persuasion. So if, in fact, I feel like I hear fans constantly persuading me to do something that maybe I even have some doubt about, or some I'm leery about, or I'm frustrated, and hearing the fans pump me up in that way could be completely motivation, but more importantly, confidence. And that leads to me being motivated to continue to do what it is that I need to do. So I think y'all are on the same wavelength. That's just back to your chicken and egg. Like, what starts first? Is it I am motivated and that builds my confidence, or I am confident and that builds my motivation? And there may be a theory on that, but I'm not sure on it either way. But I think something else that the fans can bring would be positive emotion. So if you're thinking about, if I have a bunch of fans, especially if you're at home, have a bunch of fans, they're all screaming for us and like urging us on, then what a great atmosphere to work in. Imagine like if we were in our cubicles and people were excited that we were in our cubicles and cheering for us. I feel like I would do some really good work.
That would scare me.
I mean, if they brought their signs, they're standing outside, they're like, hey, pump out a good project today, or write a great paper today, teach really well. I would get really excited. I would get pretty stoked. I think it would, in fact, elicit some positive emotion, which we know increases our creativity. We know there's many benefits as far as our health, well-being, satisfaction, energy levels with that positive emotion. So I think at the very bare bones, something that fans can bring would be positive emotion. Without the fans, you're going to have to rely really heavily on the other players to bring that positive emotion. And if we start to falter, not get down on ourselves to the point where all we have is now this negative emotion that's brewing. And that would affect our performance in a negative way.
To me, it seems like it would be hard to tease out the independent effects of what fans bring to athletes. I feel like this is just me spitballing here, but it seems to me that a lot of them are, is enmeshed the right word? I don't know. That they, in some way or another, link together and influence each other, but ultimately come from the fans. And the athlete perceives the fans as supporting them. And I think that's probably a big aspect of it too.
I still think, like, I understand fans can do a lot of good, but as an athlete, you have to get pretty efficient at tuning out fans. And so I think they can also be a source of distraction. So without fans, you're able to lock into your sport a lot more. Now, you get used to training that way, so it is an adjustment to play without fans. So, you have to leverage your team, your people, which I think a byproduct of no fans in the stands are potentially closer teams, because you have to get to know each other's energy levels. You have to get to know, how can I be a benefit to my teammate instead of hindering their energy, hindering their motivation or confidence. So rather than relying on the fans. But I'd be interested to hear an athlete talk about what it's like, or like what does a fan actually do for them in their performances.
So Morgan, I know you're new to golf. Whenever I played golf in high school, typically our matches were nobody was with us. It was just a group of 4 would go out, we'd play a hole, you'd move on to the next hole, so on and so forth. And the only people that were out there would be our coaches, and they're only allowed to talk to us in between holes. They're not allowed to coach up while we were playing a hole. Then we would, if we made it to regionals, if we made it to state, we were allowed to have fans watch. And I remember seeing my parents come out and watch me. And my mom shoots like a 60 on 9 holes. She's not good, but she loves it. Like, she just likes being out there. And my dad was pretty good when he plays regularly. So I could see them, and I know that they know the game, and I could see their faces like they were almost planning what I should be doing. And because they were never around, they didn't know how to act as fans. Like, do I golf clap? Do I sit silently? Can I yell? Can I, like, toot a horn? I'm not sure.
Toot toot.
Toot toot. And then probably get a foul on us or something. I don't know. Get kicked off the course immediately. No. So for me, and granted, I am not an elite athlete. We didn't train in this way. But I do know that having them come out when I normally didn't have fans was such an adjustment, and I got more fixated on them than on my play, because I wanted to impress them. They already knew how I played. They knew what I was regularly shooting, so it wasn't a surprise. But I still wanted them to be proud, like, oh, you're out here. I want you to see how well our team's doing. And man, that got my head. But again, we didn't train for that, and this would be the opposite. So to your point, I think fans can be distracting, especially. But if you use them as a cue almost, or if you use them in the right ways and intentionally, so allowing yourself to control how you will use the fans rather than letting the fans dictate how you then go about feeling and what you go and do. So if you can map out or plan out in advance, here's what I can anticipate, fans or no fans, this is what I'm going to do about it. But I don't know how many athletes actually think about the fans or consider that and actually do work beforehand and afterwards to decide how they are going to utilize the fans or lack thereof.
I think Jess and Morgan bring up a good question without stating it, but it's, what is the true effect of fans on a performance for a home team and for an away team? Like, what is the true effect? How much do they actually influence a performance? Like, sure, I believe they do influence a performance, but to what extent, I can't say for sure. But it seems like it can be significant, or sometimes sometimes it's just not as significant for whatever reason.
I think that'd be really hard to research, just because you alluded to it earlier, Diego, talking about perception of an athlete evaluating the fans or evaluating like the situation with the fans, and Jess, you just talked about it. So you'd really have to look at the interpretation of an athlete and how do they perceive the fan base and what does it do for them or what does it not do. I think it also depends on the sport, though, because I know in basketball they have the people standing behind sport talk. I swear I'm a sports psychology person.
The bench?
No, the
The
shooting
rim?
free throws, the people that try and distract them.
Oh, they did do a lot of studies on that. The fans in the back with like the.
Yeah, that stuff. What?
But it's behind. It's behind the hoop. It's behind the rim. It's behind the goal.
Okay, so behind the hoop.
Yeah.
And what was I saying again?
Some people distracting players behind the hoop?
I completely lost all train of thought.
Oh, wait.
That's okay.
I'll jump in, Morgan, because there is a study that talked about in basketball, if you are behind the rim and they have those little wavy things. I don't know how to describe them. They're almost like a balloon animal, but also the clappers.
The thunder sticks.
Thunder sticks. Yeah, some of them are wavy, some of them don't wave, they just clap. Or you see people that will print out literally like large heads of people's faces, anything that's going to distract. And they measured the athlete, whoever's shooting the free throw. So typically during free throws, that's when you're going to make noise, do whatever, because it's a high percentage shot. So and the amount that players practice, it's free for a reason, right? Like you should be able to hit this shot. So they distract you, and they measured the athlete's eye movement and noticed that it in fact distracted them enough, and then measured their performance, distracted them enough that it's worth the fans doing, because it took some players out of that typical rhythm and the routine and was actually successful and effective in distracting players in that way.
Sounds like they need some sports psychology consulting.
But even at that, yes, maybe sports psychology can help probably in some way. But there's also a point where like your body's just going to naturally pick something up. We don't necessarily control our eye movement. It moves. I was reading that we don't register like 40, 50 minutes of our day because of it, our brain eliminates how much our eye moves. So in that moment, like, yeah, we can try and train attention control to lock into this moment, ignore everything, but your body is still going to pick up signals.
I think some of it is that depth perception that was changing. So because the background is in fact moving, it causes, yes, your eye to track that. And that's where you lose the ability to look at a stationary object, i.e. the hoop, and be able to use it as like a relative point of what I need to aim for, because everything in the background is moving. But that's where fans can help. Similarly to in the Superdome, so go Saints, it measures, and I think Seattle's the same, the way that their stadium is constructed, it holds noise. So at least I know if you've ever been to a Saints game, or if you ever do go to a Saints game, it gets so loud and it stays loud that the players have a hard time not calling timeouts, calling plays. So they have to call timeout. So fans can help in that sense of, I'm going to use what I can control, which is my voice, to cause you to get off your game plan. And my team, the home team, doesn't even have to do anything. So the fans are almost kind of like with Seattle's slogan of like 12th man. We're helping you play the game. We are helping you at least have a leg up. And so maybe that can benefit. I may have taken you off a little bit there. I apologize.
I don't know. I just really hate that. Like, me as a fan, I just want to watch. I don't want to mess up someone's game, because I don't know why that bothers me, but it does.
Does it go back to the idea that you like sport as a pure expression of like competition that we spoke about on a previous episode?
Nice plug there. But yeah, I think so. It's just like swimming. I know I always go back to swimming, but it's like you're racing. Like, yeah, there's people yelling and it can help, but honestly, you hear them for a split second and you're back underwater. So, and that's for a few strokes. Most of the time your head's in the water, your ears are in the water, so you can't really hear. But it's you're racing. Who's the fastest? And if you're not the fastest, then
You're last.
no. You're just, I don't know. I just like how raw it is. And so the idea of fans manipulating an environment. I know that's part of the sport or part of the game or part of the environment, what have you. Just takes away from that. And so maybe that's why it bothers me.
But Morgan, question, if there aren't certain factors such as fans, would that not mean that we have less of a job to do as sports psychology consultants? Then in fact we are lessening our importance in an athlete's journey because there are fans and because there are things such as outside distractors. Then we do know how much the mental side comes into play. And so therefore that increases the relativity for us having job and relevance to an athlete or any performer.
I'm not saying, let me be clear, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be fans. I'm just saying the idea of a fan intentionally distracting someone else's performance or their game just, I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me. But I'm not saying, by no means am I saying there shouldn't be fans. And I am that person who will sit quietly and watch something, whether I'm in the stands or not. But that's beside the point. You asked, does it decrease our relevance if there are no fans? I don't think so, because environment is always going to change. And honestly, our own thoughts can be enough of a distraction half the time that even if there weren't any fans, there's a lot that sports psychology can help an athlete with. Like, for example, golf. Even without fans, there is a lot that happens environmentally that changes or shifts within your own performance, within its own whole, within its own swing, that sports psychology is relevant for, to a point. Now, I mean, I was always taught that the goal of a sports psychology consultant is to put themselves out of a job. You're equipping an athlete or a performer or a soldier with the necessary skills to master or at least call on certain skills regardless of an environment and understand how to regulate their own mentality towards something. And then once you get to that point, like, they're free. Like, it's on them to now employ whatever skills that you trained. So, I mean, ultimately the goal is to put ourselves out of a job and train that up in people. I don't think it's dependent on a fan base being present or not, because there's enough distraction in our own brains and in a natural environment wherever you are, whatever sport you play.
Yeah, I think part of what you're talking about is our own, I don't know if it's biological or psychological limitations as humans. We are inevitably tasked, I guess for lack of a better word, to respond or at least acknowledge novel stimulation. This is like backtracking to like 10 minutes ago, but I just can't get that thought out of my head because it's relevant to what we're talking about.
I don't know if it's a limitation. I just think it's the way our brains take in information. I mean, sure, it can be a hindrance that our brains take in so much information that it can only process a small portion of it consciously.
That's a limitation.
I don't know if it's a limitation, though.
I don't mean limitation with any sort of negative connotation, but in like the truest neutral sense of the word. Like, there are some things that we as humans are inevitably going to experience. I'm not sure what other word else to use, but there's like responding or acknowledging novel stimuli, and then there's also like the reflexes that babies have whenever you, what is it, like run your finger down their foot, they like curl. So it's stuff like that. Like, it's just stuff that's found cross-culturally amongst all humans. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, if I am, then please correct me, somebody, that acknowledging or responding, however you want to word that as well, to novel stimulation is something that we inevitably experience. Does that make sense?
It makes sense in that there are things that we are currently aware of in our depth of knowledge that we can try to control for. And then there's things that we're just going to experience that we can't necessarily control for. We can learn from and hopefully we can potentially control for later. But there's some things that we just can't necessarily measure right now, can't necessarily control ever. But I think one thing is for certain, Morgan, you're going to get exactly what you want in this time of seeing sport at its purest, because no fans are going to be in the stands for a foreseeable future. So at least in this time frame where sports are starting to come back but fans are not, you will see the potential impact that fans do have based on the fact that now we have a before and an after. Hey, here's with fans, here's without fans. How are things different? So we get an opportunity to see if people's play does improve or doesn't, and that at least gives us maybe some insight. Doesn't necessarily answer, but provides insight.
There's going to be a ton of studies made, I bet.
I was just going to say that I hope there are
I hope
a
so
lot
too.
of studies. So if you're listening and you do research, please, Ryan, Dr. Ryan Hawkins,
Put me on that
Port
publication.
Eustis, please research this. Please.
Somebody.
But in the meantime, if you listening have thoughts or kind of predictions about what impact a lack of fans in the stands. What was our question? Diego, can you say that a little more clearly than I just did or tried to do?
If you have any thoughts or your own take on the question regarding if performance will be changed for athletes now because of COVID-19 with no fans in the stands?
Fans in the stands. Or questions for us following up anything that we said?
Yes. In this episode or other ones as well.
Yeah, let us know. Drop a comment in. Wow, words, Morgan. Gosh. It's early, y'all. Okay? I think I need another cup of coffee. But, gosh. Drop your questions or responses in the comment section below.
Or on Facebook at R2 Performance Center, Fort Polk. And just another reminder, we fall under the Army Resilience Directorate, and you can find them on Facebook and Twitter at Army Resilience. So I believe that's all our thoughts on today's topic, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Yeehaw. Even